Chapter 51. Granny Oyo chides Rava. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. That was a spectacular victory, I must say. Instructor Mandu commented once they landed on their settlement. He stared at Inala and whispered, "You were right about that imagination art. All I had was a mere glance, and even that almost destabilized my spirit container. I survived." Inala gasped as he landed on his settlement, relieved as he broke out in cold sweat. They were scary. Too scary. I get what you're saying. Even as a master, I was overwhelmed by their aura. Instructor Mandu stared at the goosebumps that had formed on his skin. The settlement leader and Lady Mother were on a whole other level. The duo entered a channel and made their way to Inala's house. Once Inala entered his house, Instructor Mandu bowed his farewell. It will take a couple of days before the orders start coming in. Get some rest and prepare as much clay as possible. I had to push back the portrait orders because of this event. I'll be ready. Inala bowed in gratitude. It's only thanks to you that I can contribute to the clan. Don't mention it. Instructor Mandu waved casually and walked away. Continue working hard and increase your contribution to the clan. Inala closed the door and slumped on the floor in the living room, exhausted. After resting for an hour, he got up and began to cultivate. I wouldn't have to worry about paruta fruits. I obtained a wealthy client this time. Each order would easily net me hundreds of paruta. I'll reach my goal without issues. That means. He grinned and began training. I should become as strong and sturdy as possible. Isn't that right, Ganala? Two soft slaps resounded outside. For others, the sound served as a distraction. But to him, it was encouragement. Humans were social creatures. Inala too was no different. And the only reason he became a shut-in in his past life was due to his disappointment toward society. Even here, he was still alone. He didn't have anyone to have his back, as he was an orphan. No one in the academy wished to befriend a death row student. After all, not anyone thought he would survive his death sentence. They didn't wish to get attached emotionally to someone like that. That was why no student approached him. The 7 colors among the death row students were competitors. They couldn't become friends. At present, Inala and Greha had allied, but that was only until the first major disaster. Their goals were aligned until then. But there lay more treasures beyond that, one set per each. It meant, as long as they cultivated, Greha and Inala would return to being competitors and even enemies. Considering such a person as a friend wasn't possible. Being unable to confide in someone indeed made him lonely. And in a setting where death stared down on him daily, it made him feel like an abandoned child in darkness, without any support in sight. In that situation, Ganala had his back. The 44th Empyrean Tusk was aware of his origin, his thoughts, and his worries. Despite everything, she supported him, silently acknowledging his efforts. She spurred him to work harder and encouraged him. Every crisp tail slap was to intimidate the enemy. But all the gentler slaps were directed at him as encouragement. There were no words exchanged between the two, but they could converse. Whatever Inala thought was read by Ganala. And she replied by varying the intensity of her tail slap. After hearing it enough times, Inala was beginning to understand the emotional intent behind each. Being alone would eventually make him mad, especially since his home was in a corner of the settlement, devoid of any human interaction. That was why he talked to Ganala non-stop. He felt he would be able to stay sane that way. Inala couldn't say whether or not he considered Ganala a friend, but the Empyrean Tusk was someone he considered valuable on an emotional basis. He had already formed an attachment to her. Even though it was bad, considering she was old and would die in the future, he didn't care. I'll do my best to ensure you survive the first major disaster. Rava, where is Master? Virala was confused. I didn't see her for the past 2 days. I'm not sure. Let me check her room. Saying so, Rava climbed down the stairs of their house and arrived at a node. Four channels spread out from there, each leading into a housing area where Granny Oyo's children and grandchildren lived. Rava's parents, unfortunately, died long ago. Hence, she had been living with her grandmother all along. She turned and entered a channel that led to her grandmother's secret house. It was where Granny Oyo refined various medicine for the clan. She arrived before the door and knocked on it. "Grandma, are you inside?" "What happened, Rava?" Granny Oyo's voice came from within. "I'm busy. I was just worried," Rava said and turned the doorknob, saying after noticing that it was locked, "Can I come inside?" "Sure," Granny Oyo's voice resounded softly as the door opened. Rava entered the house, which was pretty much a room. It was shaped like a cube, with the length of the sides spanning 30 meters. The walls were covered with shelves, stored to the brim with all sorts of vials. In the center of the room stood a massive pranic beast that was shaped like a chameleon, but on its back stood a vat, slightly tilted towards the front. Intense heat billowed within the vat, like tongues of flame. There were swirling regions of hot and cold within, the pressure varying as the pranic beast desired. The variations caused multiple extracts of the substances to flow out and react in a certain way, transforming into tonics. Pranic beast, pitcher salamander. Amazing. Rava muttered in a daze. A couple of hours later, the process concluded as a stream of liquid flowed out of the vat, spread into hundreds of streams, and entered tiny vials each. Following that, the pranic beast vanished after a burst of prana. Granny Oyo stood in its place. With a thought from her, a dress flew towards her. She calmly wore it and stared at Rava. "How's your relationship with Virala?" "It's going good." Rava nodded. "I wish to wholeheartedly support him." "Don't be stupid," Granny Oyo uttered coldly. "A valueless woman would be used and discarded mercilessly." Virala isn't like that," Rava argued. Maybe not. "But," Granny Oyo snorted, "don't be someone that would allow him to entertain such thoughts. Virala is significantly more talented than you. He's absorbing whatever I teach him at a rate dozens of times faster than you." Granny Oyo commented, "As long as he doesn't die a premature death, he'll become a master. But what about you? Even with my support, you'll barely reach the peak of the body stage. He'll feel you're inferior. And if he chooses to go with another woman, you won't even have enough strength or authority to keep him in check. Then, what must I do?" Rava cried, "I truly love him." "It's simple," Granny Oyo grinned cunningly, "I'll impart you a certain skill." Chapter 52. Primary extortion skill. You are listening at novelfull.audio. What is this monstrous skill? Rava was stunned as she collated the details of the skill in her mind. The bone slip she gained the skill from turned into dust and sprinkled on the floor. "Would I really need something like this?" Rava shrieked in a fluster. "Do you think you're a better judge of character than me?" Granny Oyo glared. "Foolish brat, don't you understand why I am giving you such a skill?" "I do, but this feels diabolical." Rava felt dejected. "Using this on someone I love is. Virala isn't someone simple. You can even say he's dangerous." Granny Oyo expressed her thoughts. "If he's like that, then why did you accept him as your disciple?" Rava asked. "Just because I love him isn't a reason enough to move your heart, right?" "You're right," Granny Oyo nodded. "Even if he becomes your husband, I could care less. My skills are too valuable to be passed down to just the lover of one of my countless grandkids. If you put it that way, I truly feel insignificant." Rava was depressed. "That's the truth," Granny Oyo said without a change in expression. "I have 14 children. Every one of them has at least 6 kids. Even after many deaths, the number of my relations is still significant. 2 sons and 3 daughters. That's how many of my children died a month ago. I didn't even shed a tear for them." She stared at Rava calmly, causing the latter to shudder. It made Rava realize the truth, shattering her delusion. Grandma is only allowing me to stay with her to relieve her boredom. She could care less if I died. A glance at Granny Oyo's unflinching expression even after recounting the death of 5 of her children, Rava was shocked. Only then did he understand that the woman before her was a monster that had been alive for more than a century. As someone affected by the fragment disease, she started her life as a death row student. The amount of things she had to endure to survive until now was incomparable. She had slaughtered her way through countless pranic beasts to suppress her disease and try to find a cure. Along the way, she lost her humanity. To her, having another child was merely a way to experiment with another method to suppress her disease. She was a maniac, her only desire other than becoming strong was to cure her disease. For that reality, anything was fair game. If Rava didn't give Granny Oyo any entertainment value, she would be abandoned without hesitation. A student without a backing, even if she were to become an elite, it was just a matter of time before a pranic beast chomps upon her head. Realization struck her hard, shattering the net of safety Rava had been wrapped under. It forced her to think using all her wits, for the first time in her life focused on survival. Surprisingly, she was able to think and conclude most of Granny Oyo's intentions, feeling her mind functioning unrestricted. See, you can do it if you try. Granny Oyo smiled internally. She was originally pissed about the damsel-in-distress aura Rava was exhibiting. Now, she's gradually becoming a proper mammoth clansman. Does Virala have enough potential to contribute immensely to the clan? Rava asked upon consolidating her thoughts. What are the benefits and risks? Let's see, Granny Oyo trailed off before speaking softly. He's a variable that might show us a way out of certain doom. That's the benefit. And what is the risk? Rava asked. He can result in our doom. Granny Oyo laughed. He's an insanely high-risk high-reward case. So, the skill you gave me is to combat that high-risk scenario, right? Rava could finally make sense of Granny Oyo's thought process. Pretty much, Granny Oyo nodded. Then, you know what to do next, right? Yes, I'll wrap my fingers firmly around him. I'll be the only woman he ever thinks about. Rava nodded. I'll succeed, no matter what. That's good. Granny Oyo nodded and threw her a bone slip. In it contains the knowledge I gathered about taming a guy. It's a compilation from countless women from our clan. We had something like this. Rava was shocked as she absorbed all the knowledge. Why is this even a thing? Why do you think? Granny Oyo snorted. We're a merchant clan. We visit various kingdoms all the time. And plenty of women in these kingdoms are gorgeous beauties. We mammoth clansmen value battle strength above all. So, even our women are robust looking. But, that's not the case in those kingdoms on the ground. She huffed in disdain. There are women there that go their entire lives prettying themselves up. Even their cultivation techniques are geared to make them more alluring to a man. For those women, bagging a mammoth clansman is a sign of victory. She stared, her eyes cold. Oftentimes, they succeed, since they are trained to charm men. Of course, once those women board our settlement, we'll kill them using the various opportunities present. But it's still annoying to lose our men to some weak trash. So, that resulted in the birth of these techniques. Rava nodded. We're basically brainwashing our men into worshipping us as the perfect wives, huh? It's not guaranteed to work. Granny Oyo nodded. After all, it's not a skill but merely a collection of mind games. I'm not talking about that, Rava said and stared at the bone powder on the floor. I'm talking about the primary extortion skill. Grandma. How did you create such a diabolical skill? I extracted a lot of information from a certain reincarnate that inspired me to create it. Granny Oyo thought of Inala and smirked. He's truly a treasure trove of inspiration. You don't need to know, Rava. Granny Oyo calmly tapped Rava's forehead. I made sure you'll forget the skill after using it once. Moreover, you'll be unable to divulge this information to anyone else. It also cannot be extracted from your memory by any cultivator, even by a master stronger than me. I understand, Rava bowed in response. Virala was looking for you just now. What should I say to him? I'll be in closed-doors meditation for the next 10 months. Granny Oyo said curtly, I'm preparing to break through. I'll leave Virala to you, Rava. You can make use of the wealth I left in my house out there. This is my test to you. She said, if you succeed, I'll consider nurturing you in seriousness. If all you did is squander my wealth, I will successfully inherit your business. Rava's eyes turned cold and calculating, and I'll make Virala submit to me. Be assured of it, Grandma. Chapter 53. Rava takes charge. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Mystic Bone Art, Primary Extortion. Rava and Virala joined bodies as she activated the skill, feeling all prana drain from her body and condense into a mysterious effect that flowed through the region where their bodies connected and entered Virala. I feel amazing. Virala exclaimed in ecstasy, what did you do, Rava? It's a skill I learned from one of my aunts. Rava whispered in Virala's ears. She said using the skill takes the man to heaven. Have you reached there? Yes. Virala muttered weakly, fuck. That was hot. How did this girl transform from a submissive starfish to such a hot succubus? Virala fainted upon climax. Rava calmly coiled her arm around him as her eyes glazed from pleasure turned cold. She felt a minor change in his body and thought, 1 down, 99 more to go. The primary extortion skill used all of her prana to transform into an effect that fused into Virala's first spirit container. It transformed the spirit container, but the changes couldn't be noticed by Virala. That was the nature of the skill. It would be completed after all 100 spirit containers are affected. Rava calmly got up and dressed, staring at the mirror nearby to observe the changes in her presence. Ever since I gained the primary extortion skill, my mind became different. I feel awake and can see through basic schemes. I have become calculating. A mere skill changed me completely. I'm no longer the old Rava. Grandma is amazing. She thought in praise, for Granny Oyo created such a revolutionary skill. Her attention then fell upon the sleeping Virala. Now I can feel it clearly for myself. Her eyes turned even colder. This fucker doesn't love me in the slightest. Adjusting her clothes, Rava opened a drawer nearby and popped the contents of a vial in her mouth, recovering some prana. She then arrived before a secure room that only Granny Oyo could enter. Rava placed her hand on it and watched the door open. Grandma Oyo already gave her prana signature access to the room, allowing Rava to enter and leave as she pleased. She stared at the containers filled with paruta fruits, a bunch of elixirs, and liters of medicine. This is my test. I need to achieve success using these resources. Thinking as such, Rava consumed a bunch of paruta fruits to build up her prana values. She then began to train non-stop, strengthening her spirit. A strong spirit foundation gives me enough potential to cultivate. Spirit stage was where one laid down the foundation for their potential. Body stage was where they filled up the foundation and sculpted their strength. And it was in the life stage did a cultivator truly embark on their cultivation journey. As she trained, employing her changed mindset, Rava went through her past, focusing her utmost attention on the first minor crisis. Only in Sumatra Chronicles was it labeled the first minor crisis. That was solely because it was the first minor crisis in the book. In the Mammoth clan records, that was merely recorded as a minor crisis, one of the many faced by the clan. And as Rava focused on the records of the minor crisis, she thought of a few individuals that stood out from the rest. Risha, Blola, Greha, and finally, Inala. All are death row students but survived in a situation where students vastly stronger and more talented than them had died to the mud vipers. Rava relaxed her prana, causing the rotating bone sphere nearby to fall to the floor. Right, I haven't seen any of them in class recently, except Inala. Rava quickly entered Virala's room and surfed through his drawer, picking up a bone slab. It was a controller through which the user could sense the locations of all the spy bone fragments he had dispersed. This was an item refined by Granny Oyo, something they used all the time on dangerous pranic beasts. That way, the moment the pranic beast came in range, they would be aware. A cultivator would be able to sense the position of his spirit weapon as long as it was within range. Spy bone fragment was an extension of that. It was a quasi-spirit weapon. It couldn't be wielded like a spirit weapon. In exchange, its sensory range was enhanced, allowing the user to sense its position from kilometers away. A spy bone fragment was only the thickness of a strand of hair and barely a centimeter long. It had the property to stick to surfaces. And as Virala slipped one each to the clothes of the reincarnates, he could always monitor their locations. By infusing his prana into the bone slab, he was aware of the position of all the reincarnates. He had brought the controller with him to the fair. It was part of the goods in the trolley and it was Rava that had brought it back. After all, the spy bone fragments came as a set with the controllers. They were expensive to refine and the equipment had only been lent to Virala. Of course, the latter didn't have a use for it after the fair. Just like the reincarnates, he judged no use for it until the first major disaster started. By then, the reincarnates would have purchased new clothes. So, it made sense to plot new spy bone fragments after that. Hence, the equipment was lying abandoned. Rava reclaimed it and infused her prana into it. Virala was strangely antagonistic to his fellow death row students. Why is that? Now that I think about it, there's no explanation for his actions. She was stunned upon sensing the locations of the students. Inala is in the 43rd settlement. How? I cannot sense Blola's location. Why? It seems he's not even in the settlement. Moreover, what is this? She shuddered. Why is Risha in the heart? Rava felt she might be mistaken and doubled on the location, there's no doubt. He's indeed in the heart. She hurried to her grandmother and banged the door, closing the door in a hurry to stare at Granny Oyo, ignoring her displeased look to state, look into this once. Granny Oyo inserted her prana into the controller and nodded, I'm aware. Rava panicked. As long as you don't reveal this information to anyone else, you won't be executed by the settlement leader. Granny Oyo said and crushed the controller, if you can capitalize on this information, go ahead. All right. Rava nodded. Don't disturb me anymore. Saying so, Granny Oyo shut the door and locked it, also adding multiple barriers to not be interrupted anymore. If she's aware, then Risha must be doing something amazing. Otherwise, how has he been granted entry to the heart? Thinking as such, Rava recalled the locations of each reincarnate and made her way to the house of the nearest. Thankfully, Greha's house is located right next to a channel entrance. I needn't fear an attack from the zingers in that case. After traveling for some time, Rava approached Greha's door and knocked on it, stunning the latter when he opened the door. Chapter 54. Blola's Path. You are listening at novelfull.audio. We meet again, Greha. Rava smiled when the door opened. I'm not Greha. Saying so, Greha shut the door loudly. That's rude. Rava felt as such. But after some thought, she realized his behavior was natural since Greha considered her Virala's crony. When the mud vipers rushed in the shelter, he too protected me. She calmly knocked on the door, waiting patiently even as Greha never responded. An hour passed, but the knocking continued. Rava knocked once every few seconds. And it seemed she had annoyed him enough as 3 hours later, a frustrated Greha opened the door. Why are you here? I just wanted to talk. Rava tilted her head cutely. How are you, this fucking woman? Greha barely controlled himself from turning Rava into mud viper food. He spoke coldly, please leave, I'm busy. I don't have time to chit-chat. Virala doesn't know I'm here. Rava smiled brightly. Of course, her eyes were emotionless, creeping Greha, so, let's talk inside, alright. Unless you want me to return and embrace Virala while crying about your rudeness. She was basically threatening to expose Greha's location to Virala if he didn't talk to her. Sure, go ahead. Saying so, Greha shut the door. I came here to purchase mud viper eggs from you. Rava didn't seem to mind her treatment as she continued, I'll buy 15 eggs from you daily. The door opened as Greha sported a merchant-like attitude, rubbing his palms together as he invited Rava in, please come inside, Lady Rava. Why didn't you say you were a customer? His abrupt behavior change stunned her, even when she came prepared. Rava entered the living room and flinched under the stares of dozens of mud vipers. How many eggs do you need? Greha asked, ready to make the calculations, and what is the purpose of your purchase? Purpose? Rava frowned, why do you need that? I have to submit a report to the clan daily in regards to the number of purchases and the people that purchased from me, including what they use the eggs for. Greha said, it's to avoid a wastage of valuable clan resources. Then, I'll only purchase the eggs that aren't sold. Rava said, that way, I'm only using the resources that might go to waste. I'll pay the market price for them. As for the purpose, put it down as experimentation. I have around 8 unsold eggs from today's batch. Greha said, based on the sales, I'll have anywhere from 3 to 10 unsold daily. I'll take them all. Rava nodded. Alright, Greha pulled out a contract and added in a couple of details, giving it to Rava, sign here. I'll notarize it using Instructor Mandu. I'm prohibited from mentioning this deal to Virala. Rava frowned at the clause. After a moment, she casually signed it, that's fine by me. There were a few more clauses, all regarding Virala, ensuring nothing of this transaction could be found out by him. There was also a fine imposed otherwise. The fine amount ensured Greha would have obtained enough resources from Rava to succeed in his plan. Even if Virala tries anything shady after finding out his house's location, Greha wouldn't lose anything. Rather, things would only benefit him once he notarized it. Moreover, even if Virala did something after that, he would be subject to legal action under Mammoth clan law, thereby allowing Greha to get rid of his strongest competitor without moving a muscle. This fine is his true goal. He's hoping that I reveal this transaction to Virala. Rava didn't let her thoughts show on her face as she got up and shook hands with Greha, here's to a fruitful cooperation. Greha frowned once Rava left, how the fuck did she come to know my location? Did Anala leak it? No, he has more to lose if he does. Did Instructor Mandu slip up? That doesn't seem likely either. He's absolutely strict about such things. How did she find out then? Greha felt the urge to commit murder. But he controlled himself and looked around, smiling, whatever, it doesn't matter. I need plenty of resources for my project anyway. He thought, and through this deal, I can purchase lots of medicine from Rava. Also, he muttered upon recalling Rava's figure, she seems different from before. Judging by her expression, she probably had a falling out with Virala. That's good too. His actions might have hastened her awakening. In a wide tunnel faintly lit by luminescent moss flowed a canal, only 3 meters in breadth. Seated on a boat and allowing the weak water currents to carry him was Blola. The boat was a spirit weapon, created using a pile of bones he had purchased and molded into the current structure by employing the mystic bone art. For the past month, Blola had been preparing his escape from the 44th settlement. All his preparations were for that. Blola created a parachute with a turbine attached to the back. Using his prana, he made the turbine generate wind, controlling his direction of motion once he jumped down from the Empyrean Tusk's trunk. Once he landed next to the secret path in the Inuda Plains, Blola packed the parachute in his luggage, entered the path and began his refinement. He converted all the materials used in the chute to create the boat, using up everything he had brought with him. There was only 2 days' worth of ration on his being, fully consumed by now. He was hungry, but Blola didn't panic. Instead, he calmly observed the tunnel, recalling the information from Sumatra Chronicles. Eventually, he came across a patch of moss that glowed vibrantly. Blola parked the boat and used a bone knife to collect the moss. He popped a clump in his mouth and almost spat it out, disgusting. But once the moss was chewed and swallowed, a warm feeling pervaded his being. Upon feeling that, Blola consumed the moss until his stomach was full. He sat on the ground and activated his mystic bone art, gradually converting it into prana. As expected, this is indeed spirit moss. Spirit moss was a substance on par with an elixir. A kilogram of it sold for 16,000 paruta. Upon consumption, spirit moss netted very little prana. But the reason they were so exorbitantly priced was their nature to strengthen the spirit container. This strengthening effect applied to all cultivators, whether in the spirit stage, body stage, or even the life stage. In Sumatra Chronicles, when the herd returned to the Anuta plains for the second time, Risha chances upon this secret path. By consuming this spirit moss, he becomes further overpowered. But that was when he was a master, with a voracious appetite for resources. Blola was only at the spirit stage. There's more spirit moss here than what I can consume. This is the perfect resource for my journey. Once he had his fill, Blola fell asleep. The next day, he got up, consumed some more spirit moss and got onto his boat as he cultivated. There was spirit moss everywhere he stopped, so he wasn't worried. In 6 months, when I exit this tunnel, I'll have reached the peak of the spirit stage. Blola grinned confidently. The others can fight amongst themselves for second place with Risha while I reign supreme. Chapter 55. Imprint Acceptance Skill. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ganala, you're experienced. You have also gone through all my memories. Inala said as he stared at a bunch of items before him that he had just purchased from the market. Will my plan to obtain the Zinger Queen's power work? Tap twice for a yes and thrice if something is missing. He focused on his ears, hearing 3 soft slaps, sighing as a result. So, I'm still missing something. Inala picked up a brush and began to write a list of items on paper. I'll be writing the items slowly. Slap twice when I'm writing the missing item. He was thankful to Greha. After all, only through the latter did he find out the fact that the 44th Empyrean Tusk could access his memories and read his thoughts. Instead of being flustered by such a fact, Inala rejoiced instead. After all, the moment he figured out the fact that Ganala supported his actions, he revealed the entirety of his plan to her. Following that, he relied upon her knowledge and experience to perfect his plans. His only source of information was Sumatra Chronicles. By researching the novel, he derived a result. But, there was no guarantee that it would work. With the slightest variable, things might fail. The variable could be as simple as a tiny amount of impurity in one of the resources he used. Therefore, it was best to raise the guarantee to 100%. Ganala served as a perfect database regarding that. An Empyrean Tusk lived for around 2 millennia. That was an overwhelming duration of life. A time span in which the knowledge one could accumulate was ginormous. And as the oldest in the herd, Ganala was the wisest and most experienced. She must have been through situations the other Empyrean Tusks in the herd weren't even aware of. Hence, by taking advantage of her experience, Inala could perfect his plan. As he wrote down the list, Ganala notified him of the lacking materials. I still lack 3 items, Spirit Enchantment Aureole, Humming Stalk, and a Feminine Prana Signature. Inala focused on the last item and muttered, but, don't I already have the last one? Granny Oyo turned me into her spirit weapon. Her prana signature has been imprinted on my bones. Slap. 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 Inala frowned at the response and made multiple conjectures, sighing when Ganala slapped in confirmation at one such conjecture. You mean, I need to transfer her prana signature to my spirit container. Only then it will work. Slap. Slap. How do I achieve it? Inala thought, drawing a blank, I'm not strong enough to touch her imprint. Even if I use the prana domination skill, my proficiency is lacking to succeed. Suddenly, the walls of his house shook as faint dust billowed. As the dust fell, the gravity in the room morphed, causing them to move in certain directions as they approached the floor. Once all the dust settled, Inala noticed a set of words had formed on the floor, "You're speaking to me, Ganala. I told you, right? This method works." Ganala was using an idea he thought up to communicate with him. The fact that she listened to his suggestion expressed her support. It only made him happy as Inala read the words. "My son, Inala. You need to permeate Oyo's prana signature in your fused spirit container. With my support, you'll be able to overcome the gender restriction and gain the Zinger Queen's power. To achieve that, you need to activate the third part of the puppetry skill, seventh part of the elixir condensation skill, final part of the prana domination skill, fifth part of the bone slip skill, first part of the toxin refinement skill, third part of the spirit reinforcement skill, first part of the toxin refinement skill once again, and finally, second part of the prana domination skill. Activate them all in order within 3 seconds, and you'll create the imprint acceptance skill." Imprint acceptance skill. Inala nodded after a moment of thought, "All right, I'll attempt it immediately." Since Ganala couldn't communicate with him directly, she couldn't impart a skill to him. Instead, she conceptualized the skill by making a formula using parts of the skills he knew. It was a genius move only possible for an Empyrean tusk. Inala only activated parts of the skills as mentioned, taking more than an hour to finish a round of activation. He gasped at the end, feeling like he had been holding his breath all along. After taking a breather and collating his experience, he attempted it a second time, finishing the process in under 20 minutes. By the 10th attempt, he did it under a minute. 2 days of non-stop practice later, Inala was able to bring it under 3 seconds, observing his prana stir up in response. Some sections of the parts were naturally omitted by the prana flow as nodes were created. These nodes joined together as the mystic bone art fired up on its own, piecing them together. The set of nodes wasn't the skill. Rather, it was a mere catalyst. When this catalyst influenced the mystic bone art, his prana condensed into a technique. The catalyst caused words forming the mystic bone art in his mind to leap around, like a typewriter imprinting the inked words on a piece of paper. The words settled into becoming the imprint acceptance skill. The whole process was inspirational, enlightening Inala. Mystic bone art is pretty much the alphabet. By activating only parts of the various skills in my possession, the result I created influenced the mystic bone art. The alphabets rained down in my mind and formed an essay that conceptualized the imprint acceptance skill. As long as I understand the logic behind this, I can experiment and create a bunch of skills randomly. Maybe I'll even create a useful skill down the line. Inala condensed his enlightenment, sensing it act as a catalyst for the mystic bone art, deriving a peculiar skill. In response, Ganala's tail slapped multiple times, in excitement. Inala too was excited, for this was no different from a fortuitous encounter. "This is all thanks to you, Ganala. You enlightened me by teaching me the process for creating the imprint acceptance skill. This changes everything." Inala grinned in excitement as he observed the new skill, one that would form the core of his strength, allowing him to conceptualize skills based on his experience and derive the result from the mystic bone art. Without any hesitation, he fired up the new skill by focusing on his experience in carving on mud slabs. Chapter 56. Mystic Skill Creator. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Mystic Bone Art, Mystic Skill Creator. That was the name of the new skill he gained thanks to the enlightenment provided by Ganala's actions. Mystic Skill Creator was a skill that used one's experience as a catalyst to act upon the mystic bone art. As the mystic bone art reacts to the experience, the created product would be a skill that allows the user to execute what they performed, by memory before, as a skill now. A few minutes later, a skill was created as Inala laughed raucously, this is hype. Mystic Bone Art, Sculptor. The skill of Sculptor allowed the user to wield four spirit weapons and sculpt the target. When Inala sculpted a mud slab, he had to focus to control four spirit weapons simultaneously. This was only possible due to his experience as an artist in his previous life. As Inala had only trained his mind to multitask when performing art, he was limited to wielding four spirit weapons with such precision only during his carving sessions. But now, once that became a skill, he could apply it anywhere, even in battle. He could consider an enemy cultivator or pranic beast as the sculpting target. He would be able to wield four spirit weapons to attack the target on the same level as when he did art. When the experience became a skill, it freed up a lot of his brainpower. Moreover, it created flexibility, allowing Inala to apply his strengths to fields other than art. The skill of Mystic Skill Creator was overpowered. He could feel it clearly. I don't have any other significant experiences that are enough to conceptualize another skill, but that's only for now. His lips almost reached his ears, unable to control his glee, it's training time. If he trains in a field and accumulates enough experience, he could condense the experience into a skill. That way, he could bridge the gap of talent. Inala first focused on the imprint acceptance skill, activating it as he felt Granny Oyo's imprint on his bones flinch in response. In his original plan, Inala intended to use a prana bomb on a female cultivator and absorb all her prana. Her prana stored in the prana bomb would of course possess her prana signature. He planned to use it in his plan to break through the gender limit and obtain the Zinger Queen's power. But after Granny Oyo turned him into her spirit weapon, he changed his plan. There was a stronger female cultivator's prana signature imprinted in his bones already. That raised his success rate by many times. And now, things became even more easy thanks to the imprint acceptance skill. As the skill took effect, the imprint on his right hand's index finger bone flowed through his bloodstream and fused into his first spirit container. The imprint acceptance skill divided his skeletal structure into 100 parts, with each directed towards a spirit container. Inala would only complete the process after reaching the peak of the spirit stage. Inala, are you inside? Instructor Mando's voice resounded, followed by a couple of knocks on the door. Right, I forgot about this. Inala hurriedly changed his clothes and exited the house, greeting Instructor Mando. One of the 43rd Settlement Leader's daughters has arrived to meet you. Instructor Mando glanced at the box-shaped bag, you have enough materials, right? Of course, Inala nodded, if the contents in my bag are used up, I can always bring more from my house. But that will not be necessary. I brought more than enough mud. There would be leftovers even if I work an entire day. He spoke. Instructor Mando gave a silent nod and brought Inala to the periphery of the settlement. There existed a guest room there. And seated behind a luxurious desk, drinking tea was Asiya. I have brought Inala here as per your request. Instructor Mando cupped his fists towards Asiya in respect, please notify the guard stationed here for any of your requests. Thank you for your hospitality, Instructor. Asiya cupped her fists in response. I have classes to conduct now. Instructor Mando patted Inala, I'll come by the evening to pick you up. Even after you're done with work, remain here. It's dangerous outside. The Zinger attacks have intensified. Inala bowed as he watched Instructor Mando exit. Now, Inala and Asiya were alone in the guest room. I believe we haven't introduced ourselves. Asiya cupped her fists and flashed a bright smile, I'm Asiya, the 16th daughter of the 43rd Settlement Leader, Yahard Tusk. She was there when I spoke to Yahard Tusk. Inala thought as he observed her, Latrina is Yahard Tusk's 14th daughter. She is a few months older than me. That means Asiya is at least a couple of years younger than me. I am Inala, a death row student and an orphan. Inala bowed respectfully, it's my honor to meet a dignitary. You can drop the formality, you know. Asiya quickly changed her attitude, speaking casually, first of all, I'm younger than you. Secondly, I'm still a student. So, I don't have the right to wield my status yet. Just address me as Asiya, alright? Yes, Inala nodded. He never read about Asiya in Sumatra Chronicles. She was merely Yahard Tusk's 16th daughter, 16th in line just among his daughters, not to mention the sons. The fact that I don't recall her name from Sumatra Chronicles means she either has no accomplishments or is one of the many deaths during the first major disaster. Inala didn't express his thoughts and calmly set his bag on the floor. He took a small, rectangular mud slab and stared at Asiya. Can you tell me the details of the imagination art you require? Well, we need a large portrait piece. Asiya detailed the dimensions. 2 meters tall and a meter wide, it needs to be about a zinger with a close-up shot of its face, expressing cruelty. Everything else is at your discretion. Also, you need to layer the result with bone powder. I want it to have a smooth bony texture. That's pretty simple. Inala nodded and asked, a lot of materials would be consumed, so the price would be 280 paruta, Asiya smiled, that's how much I'm paying you. Fine by me. That's a lot of money. He was getting all the raw materials for free anyway, thanks to the clan's support. So, these 280 paruta would pretty much line neatly in his pocket. Without wasting a moment, Inala got down to work. He first drew a rough diagram on the pocket-sized mud slab, jotting down all the details. Once he was satisfied, he used the mud to make a large slab, 2 meters tall and a meter wide. Asiya observed his actions with interest. But the moment Inala whipped out 4 spirit weapons, she was stunned. Mystic Bone Art, Sculptor. Chapter 57. Asiya's Death Sentence. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Amazing. Asiya's eyes shone in fascination as she observed Inala's work. How is he controlling 4 spirit weapons with such precision? He doesn't even seem the least bothered about such a mental strain. Competition was cutthroat among her siblings. To gain valuable resources, they needed to contribute accordingly to the clan. Only then were they considered worthy of being children of Yahard Tusk and Zahela. Best among their peers in terms of cultivation, a robust foundation capable of exceeding their limits and killing stronger pranic beasts, able to gather clansmen under their banner, etc. All factors were evaluated before their potential was considered. And the best among all would be nominated as Yahard Tusk's successor. In the successor race, whether it be Latrina or Asiya, they had no chance. After all, their oldest siblings had been alive for decades already, having been building up a force of their own all along. Asiya's eldest brother and sister had already entered the life stage. In comparison, she was merely a 12-year-old brat at the spirit stage. To at least make her parents acknowledge her existence, she would have to take on explosive measures. That was why, the moment she noticed Latrina's hesitation, Asiya took charge of the business opportunity Inala presented. And now, upon seeing his expertise, she grinned, I was right about him. Her eyes glinted as she stared at Inala, this guy is a gold mine in the making. And he'll all be mine. How did you train to become so proficient? Asiya inched forward from behind his shoulder, casually observing the engraving forming on the mud slab. She didn't seem to have noticed her cheek touching his, behaving ignorant, can you teach me? Don't disturb me, Asiya, Inala spoke curtly. He extended his hand and tugged her arm, forcefully making her sit on the floor next to him, you can watch my work. But I won't sell my livelihood. Did he just force me to sit on the floor? Asiya was stunned, having never been treated that way. She felt mildly pissed at his attitude towards her, this blockhead. Is my charm non-existent? In his mind, she was merely a child. So, her seduction attempt didn't even register in his senses. While Asiya faced an identity crisis, wondering if she were a woman or not, Inala continued to carve, it has become easier to sculpt once I got the sculptor skill. I can even set aside enough focus to ponder useless thoughts. Not only has my control become more precise, but I'm expending less than half the prana as compared to before. Mentally, he was less strained while working on the project. And as his proficiency in the sculptor's skill continues to increase, he'll become faster and faster while precisely controlling four spirit weapons. Asiya tried to talk to Inala, but upon only receiving curt replies, she decided to silently observe his work. I can learn a lot from his skill display. Besides, he must be focused to achieve such precise control. Let's not disturb him. I need this business to improve my standing in the family. Asiya flared up her mystic bone art as she watched Inala at work, trying to slowly apply his prana fluctuations to her own. I feel an improvement in my prana control already. This girl. Inala focused on her after an hour, noticing that Asiya was in a trance. But judging based on the way her aura condensed, she seemed to have attained enlightenment. She's insanely talented, only inferior to Risha. Then, why wasn't she mentioned even once in Sumatra Chronicles? Even Latrina was mentioned a bunch of times, despite having no effect on the plot. Guess there's only one answer. Inala calmly observed her prana fluctuation. At the age of 12, she has accumulated 94 prana. That's insane, considering how stable her spirit containers are. She was definitely killed by her siblings before she matured. Asiya was there when Inala unveiled the imagination art of defeat. She had witnessed it and didn't even lose a single unit of prana. That meant her mind was robustly trained. Two of her older siblings, one at the spirit stage and the other at the body stage, had been affected by the imagination art and lost most of their prana. Despite being the youngest at the scene, she was the least affected. Even Yahard Tusk became angry. In contrast, Asiya's emotional fluctuation was subtle. That was a sheer display of talent. If she was allowed to mature, she would become a powerhouse and most definitely be nominated as the next Lady Mother. The successor race is vicious. One of her older sisters must have caused her death before she graduated from the academy. Inala thought and couldn't help but smile. Conversely, that means she's a valuable talent. If I get her to join my team, I'll have a better advantage against the reincarnates. Until now, only Virala among the reincarnates was actively forming a team of talent. It was because he had completed his preparations towards the cure and was waiting for the first major disaster to start to take action. All the others were still making preparations. In such a situation, forming a team was only detrimental, because the team members will be targeted by the reincarnates before they matured. But the biggest reason was a lack of information. Yes, even the reincarnates didn't know which student was talented or not. After all, the students were wiped out in the first major disaster. So, the reincarnates could only guess if someone would become strong or not. There was no guarantee. This was the main reason the reincarnates refrained from forming a team. Why spend time and resources on someone that would die within a year? But Asiya was different. She was from the 43rd settlement. Therefore, even if the other reincarnates find out about her, they couldn't do anything to her, not while she was in another settlement. Therefore, it was the safest bet to make her part of his team. The only issue is her impending death. I need to do something about that. Which of her brother or sister is targeting her and how? By noon, Inala completed the imagination art. Originally, it would have taken him until evening. But the sculptor's skill hastened the process. After he neatly packed the art piece, Inala stared at Asiya, not interrupting her enlightenment session. He waited patiently, cleaning up the room in the process. Another hour later, Asiya's eyes opened, brimming with vitality. She felt refreshed, having further progressed in her cultivation. She noticed Inala calmly staring at her, blushing in response. How long were you watching? I completed my work an hour ago. So, Inala flashed a thumbs up. Since then. You could have alerted me. Asiya pouted, hiding her embarrassment as she observed the imagination art, complimenting, this is pretty effective. I would have screamed in fright if I had chanced upon it at night. She patted it. I'm satisfied with the result. She's satisfied. Inala focused upon Asiya's choice of words, quickly piecing things together. It means from the details of the commission to its price, everything was set by Asiya. It seems Sahela trusts her daughter enough to not interfere with her choice. Implying, Sahela had expectations of Asiya. It further meant that the sole authority in this business, from purchase to commission, was determined by Asiya. If I can convince her, I can create extremely thought-provoking imagination art. By selling those, I'll be making a lot more money. And Sahela's opinion of Asiya would improve. I can kill two birds with one stone. Inala was excited, and if I raise the clan's evaluation of her enough, once Asiya reaches the body stage, the clan would grant her an advanced or even an expert silver-grade pranic beast egg. There's one that comes to mind. He thought, if Asiya obtains that, she'll become my strongest ally. Chapter 58. Grim Nell. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In the treasury of every settlement exists a few pranic beast eggs, precious, waiting for their owners. An S.grade student from the Academy of Refinement is granted a beginner silver-grade pranic beast egg. That was the limit to the grade of pranic beast egg a student without a background could obtain. But there of course existed eggs superior to them, obtained by the clan after significant risks. These eggs were contested for by the masters. The successor of a master would gain eligibility to an intermediate silver-grade pranic beast. The key point here was eligibility. There exist dozens of masters in a settlement. The successors of all masters would become eligible. Thereby, depending on the availability of intermediate silver-grade pranic beast eggs, the successors will have to fight for the limited numbers. The successors that failed to get one would have to settle for a beginner silver-grade pranic beast egg. A student was named a successor only after obtaining an S.grade evaluation at the Academy of Refinement. So, they were eligible to obtain it either way. It was after this did things get messy. In the 43rd settlement, any of Yahard Tusk's children that proved themselves would receive an advanced silver-grade pranic beast egg. To prove themselves, they'll have to check various requirements as posed by the clan. Usually, these children served as the settlement's core strength, for not only would they possess the greatest amount of strength and prana, but their lifespan was also the longest. After the successor takes up the settlement leader seat, the remainder would take up seats at the clan's guardians. Beyond this, there might exist an egg, protected with utmost secrecy. It would be a priceless egg that hadn't been used only because no cultivator displayed enough potential. Every settlement had one. And the 43rd settlement kept securely an egg that was one of the best in the entire herd. Expert silver-grade pranic beast egg, Grim Nell. Grim Nell wasn't on the level of a regular expert silver-grade pranic beast. No, it was a mutated pranic beast, a mutant version of the beginner silver-grade pranic beast, Death Nell. All mutated pranic beasts possessed two natures, primary and secondary. The Grim Nell was no different. Fusing with it would grant the cultivator two natures. That would make them stand head and shoulders above the rest in terms of power. No mammoth clansman had ever fused with a gold-grade pranic beast egg. Such an egg didn't exist even in the treasury of the first Empyrean Tusk. The reason was simple. Offending a gold-grade pranic beast simply wasn't worth it. A gold-grade pranic beast would have strength on the level of an Empyrean Tusk. Every such pranic beast was an overlord that had carved its territory and ruled over it. In Sumatra continent, the stronger a pranic beast was, the weaker its fertility. Weak grunts like the mud vipers spawned baby mud vipers like a factory. But a gold-grade pranic beast would have to prepare and at most give birth twice or thrice in its long life. Therefore, they were overprotective of their young. If their egg was stolen, the gold-grade pranic beast would go into a frenzy and wouldn't stop until the poacher was put down. Such a pranic beast could even cripple an Empyrean Tusk. The strength a mammoth clansman gained from fusing with a gold-grade pranic beast egg wouldn't even make up for the losses incurred, with the Empyrean Tusk's death being one of them. Therefore, the strongest egg the mammoth clan procured was in the silver grade, and even their numbers were rare. If I could nurture Asiya into the likes of a legendary genius, she'll become eligible to obtain the Grim Knell. Just with her alone by my side, I can survive on Sumatra somehow. He intended to prevent Ganala's death with all his might. But that was only a temporary measure. The most he could do is buy a couple of months past the first major disaster. The 44th Empyrean Tusk was about to die of old age. That cannot be avoided. There was less than a year left of her lifespan. And when Risha's parents bring in the baby Empyrean Tusk, their settlement would be too weak to endure the onslaught of the second, third, and fourth minor crises that happen in quick succession. In Sumatra Chronicles, Risha did protect the baby Empyrean Tusk. But every time, he barely avoided death. Even though he didn't die, his body was reduced to a ragdoll after every single minor crisis. This was in Sumatra Chronicles. Now, with the addition of 5 reincarnates, the situation might either become manageable or end up worsening even further. Therefore, all Inala could do was solidify his strength and allies, hoping to survive the treacherous future. Since there's plenty of time, do you want to commission another imagination art? Inala expressed his interest. Well, I do have enough funds for that. But, will it be all right? Asiya pondered. Mother left everything to me. She'll only be disappointed if I squander my funds. But, Inala is the real deal. She stared at the imagination art. This will be worth the money. Despite that, I shouldn't waste my money and think of scenarios that make perfect use of the imagination art. By the way, what's the name of this piece? Asiya asked. I remember the last one having the suffix of defeat. It doesn't have one. Inala shook his head. I only intend to name pieces that were on the level of what I displayed to your parents. This isn't one of them. Then, make one next. Asiya's eyes glinted, 5 meters long and 3 meters tall. Draw the Empyrean Tusk's eyes on it. The expression should be one it makes towards enemies. Emoted in such a way that the zingers are intimidated. They are constantly attacking us. I feel like I can employ Inala's ability to counter the zingers. Or at the very least, it'll work in confusing the enemies. Asiya muttered after some thought, as long as we reduce the attack rate of the zingers, we'll have contributed immensely to the clan. Asiya picked up some mud and turned it into a palm-sized slam, following Inala's actions as she made a bunch of rough drafts on it. The emotion is simply anger. This won't do. It must be something that creeps the zingers and make them instinctively avoid approaching us. If the Empyrean Tusk eyes won't do, then a human's. Is she really a 12-year-old girl? Inala listened to her mutters, shuddering in response at the darkness of her thoughts. She was analyzing the psyche of the zingers, intending to capitalize on their worst fears. He recalled his past life. At what point in my life was I capable of having such complex thoughts? He reached that level only in his mid-20s. And this was when he considered his intelligence, cunning, philosophical, and psychiatric abilities to be way above average, even from an objective viewpoint. She's a successor candidate, all right. Inala was further assured about Asiya's talent. If it's her, then it's possible. She might obtain the Grim Knell. I'm already on track to obtaining the cure. Only 2 more items are left and I know the method to obtain them. With Ganala's active support, I will definitely succeed. Inala thought, that means I can afford to nurture Asiya. With a small push from me, she'll survive and become my strongest ally. Inala suddenly extended his hand towards Asiya, his expression serious. Asiya, if you're willing, I wish to wholeheartedly support you in your successor race, Doviko. Chapter 59. First Disciple. You are listening at novelfull.audio. You wish to support me? Asiya was stunned by his declaration. Why? I mean, I do appreciate the support. But what made you decide it so quickly? Look at what you've drawn. Inala pointed at the rough sketches she was making and erasing on the palm-sized mud slab. All these are my techniques. Even without me teaching you anything, you were able to get this far. That means, with my support, you'll grow even more. You're a princess and by far the most talented cultivator I witnessed. Inala spoke frankly, if I decide to support you, I'll be the first. Thereby, once you become the 43rd settlement's lady mother, my life will become comfortable. So, a gamble, huh? Asiya muttered. Not a gamble, Inala said in seriousness as he made eye contact. I truly believe you can win the successor race, Asiya. I don't have a chance, not in the slightest. Asiya sighed, my older siblings are already in the life stage. They don't have something that you will obtain. Inala pointed at her forehead, you're still a student. And there are still 2 years left until your graduation. As long as your contribution is significant enough, you'll receive a reserve pranic beast egg that the clan has been safeguarding. That would at most be an advanced silver-grade pranic beast egg. Asiya shook her head, all my oldest siblings possess one too. No, the Grim Nell is vastly stronger than any silver-grade pranic beast. Of course, Inala didn't reveal that. Instead, he expressed his sincerity, since your father hasn't announced his successor until now, it means he's yet to be satisfied with the results brought by your older siblings. So, why not try to fight for it, unless of course, you're afraid. Inala made an expression as if he was disappointed, sighing grandly. Ha! Excuse me. Who's afraid? Asiya was triggered by his words, glaring in anger, fine. I accept. And I'll win the successor race. It doesn't matter whether or not you win the successor race. I want you to gain possession of the Grim Nell. That alone will make you one of the strongest in the Mammoth clan. Inala thought. The majority of pranic beasts in Sumatra had a primary nature suitable for targeting their enemies individually. But the Grim Nell's primary nature affected all targets in range. It was the perfect counter against creatures like the mud vipers and zingers that attacked in swarms. Asiya would obtain strategic value once she gains the power of the Grim Nell. Since he succeeded in making her accept his proposal, Inala was content. Now, how do I best nurture her abilities? Inala never worried about trust. He had a decent competency in judging someone's character. And with that, he realized that Asiya wouldn't betray him. He did feel bothered by her strangely high interest in him, almost bordering on a romantic level. He wasn't a dense guy. But that didn't mean he would reciprocate the emotion. Asiya was barely a kid. His past life's values forbade him from aiming for a kid. But Inala did notice that by the passage of every day, the greater he cultivated using the mystic bone art, the more he was being assimilated into this world's culture, values, and mindset. Therefore, he felt that when Asiya graduates from the Academy of Refinement and is considered an adult by the standards of this world, if she still decides to pursue him, his thoughts might change. Let's not go that far with scenarios. Inala dumped all useless thoughts to the back of his head and focused on the task at hand. Well, I'll be frank with you, now that I'm competing against my siblings. Asiya calculated her position, I'll have to do a lot more than install some portraits at the academy. If I need to tick all the checks by the clan, then. After some murmurs, she stared at him, your working pace wouldn't be sufficient. That doesn't matter. Inala smirked, 2 people can do it. 2. Asiya was surprised, there's another person that can carve like you. Yeah, Inala pointed at her, you'll do it too. I'll teach it to you. You, are you being serious? Asiya was serious. Yup, Inala nodded, you know what this means, right? Yeah, come here. Asiya nodded and inched towards his face, intending to kiss him. I don't want to go to jail. Inala shrieked mentally as he took a step back and behaved like he didn't notice her actions, to avoid offending her. His brain spun into overdrive as he hurriedly looked at the ground and picked up a piece of mud. Am I that unattractive? Or is he dense? Asiya quickly recovered as she coughed and adjusted the sleeves of her clothes, appearing unconcerned to hide her embarrassment. Mystic Bone Art, Sculptor. Inala worked on the piece of mud and transformed it into a badge. The badge was carved with the images of the 4 spirit weapons he used to carve. He granted it to Asiya. If you were to accept my teachings, it means you'll officially become my disciple. Ah, that was what he was going on about. Asiya sighed mentally. Mother, it seems it'll take me a bit longer than I thought to make this guy fall for me. Well, he does have some charm. So, I'm not angry. Of course, it's not just my carving skills. I'll be teaching you many things since I am something of a genius myself. Inala boasted and extended the badge. If you accept being my disciple, take this badge. A master-disciple relationship was very valuable, since no master would accept someone else's disciple under their tutelage. This meant that for the rest of her life, Asiya would only be able to inherit Inala's skills. So, it had to be considered. She was a princess, Yahard Tusk's daughter. In contrast, Inala was a mere death row student, orphan too. From an objective standpoint, she had nothing to gain from him. Instead, she'll only lose out on a lot. But Asiya grabbed the badge and prostrated on the floor, offering her respects. I greet my master. He isn't boasting about being a genius. I can judge from his body language that he truly feels that way. It means a lot, coming from a death row student. Besides, just the accuracy he displayed in his carving skills while using 4 spirit weapons is enough reason to become his disciple. Asiya thought, just by gaining that, I'm confident in surpassing my peers and eventually facing my oldest siblings. Great. Inala grinned and sat down, motioning for her to sit across from him. I'll instruct you from the basics. There's enough time and raw materials here for you to practice. With that, Inala began his classes, obtaining his first disciple in Sumatra. Chapter 60. Deriving the Bone Slip Skill. You are listening at novelfull.audio. While Asiya trained after listening to his lecture, Inala grabbed a bone piece from his bag and held it. He closed his eyes and fired up the mystic bone art, beginning cultivation. He focused on its latter segments, raising his proficiency by recalling his experience in meeting Risha and Granny Oyo, especially when he obtained skills from them. Through the prana domination skill, Inala gained complete control over the bone piece, able to sense its every detail. Following that, he recalled the scene when he absorbed skills from bone slips. Mystic bone art, mystic skill creator. Inala catalyzed his cultivation art and peered deeper into its mysteries, taking advantage of his experience and the effects of mystic skill creator to grab the portion in the cultivation technique related to the bone slip skill. There were multiple veils over the mystic bone art, separating it by layers. Each layer conformed to a cultivation stage. The bone slip skill was available in the second layer, accessible only by body stage mammoth clansmen. But now, the effects from mystic skill creator bombarded the mist and rattled it, revealing some gap through which his consciousness entered. In the end, the segment related to the bone slip skill was highlighted, allowing Inala to grasp it and learn its secrets. Mystic bone art, bone slip. Inala inscribed the details of the sculptor's skill in the bone slip and inspected it. All right, there are no issues with it. The sculptor's skill has been perfectly copied. Man, now that I experience it for myself, I truly underestimated mystic skill creator. It's more overpowered than I thought. As long as he obtained enough experience, using mystic skill creator, he should be able to unlock the entirety of the mystic bone art, all the way to its end, transcendent stage. That would give him valuable information not available to even Risha. Moreover, with a full version of mystic bone art, the quality of skills he could derive would elevate to a whole new level. I can't wait to start training already. Asiya, take this. Saying so, Inala handed her the bone slip. A bone slip. Asiya was surprised, but how? You're only at the spirit stage. And I noticed that it was merely a piece of bone when you grabbed it. How did it become a bone slip? Only cultivators at the body stage and above can use the skill. I told you, Inala expressed pride in himself, mildly arrogant at his abilities. I'm something of a genius myself. Amazing. Asiya was excited as she grabbed the bone slip and seeped her prana through it, sensing a stream of information enter her mind and condense into a skill, sculptor skill. Master, is this what you use to carve? Addressing me as Inala will do. Inala nodded and retracted the bone slip and crushed it, destroying all information inside. He didn't have enough expertise like Risha to make the contents in the bone slip disappear after it was accessed once. That part was only accessible in the mystic bone art after reaching the life stage. Therefore, he simply corrupted the information. Of course, there was still a chance someone proficient with the bone slip skill could rewire the corrupted data and obtain the skill. Inala planned to divide the piece of bone into multiple fragments and expend them for various objects. That way, even if someone gets a fragment, the information in it would only be a garbled mess, not worth spending time and effort to decrypt it. Use the skill, Inala said and pushed a mud slab towards her, thinking as he observed her actions, it took me 6 years to brush up my art skills and a month here to convert it into its sculpting form. Now, the moment she obtained the sculptor skill, it's as if she also received my artistic sense and habits. It's like a part of me has been handed over to her. Skills are terrifying. Prana was energy condensed by the fusion between energies of the body, mind, and soul. Therefore, every unit of prana in a cultivator pretty much contained their genetic data. A skill was basically the condensation of one's experiences related to the usage of prana to achieve a certain effect. Therefore, when the skill is conceptualized, the information in it also consisted of the creator's habits, biases, instincts, etc. Therefore, when Asiya used his sculptor skill, her actions were mimicry of himself. Of course, as she continues to use the sculptor skill, it would gradually be influenced by her prana and evolve to suit her better. And now, this influence was happening at a rapid pace. From a mimicry of his actions to an original form of her own, Asiya barely took 40 minutes to do so. I fear for an average cultivator, this would have taken a few months at least. She's indeed terrifying. It's like witnessing Risha from the second half of Sumatra Chronicles. Inala became hyped at that realization. How would he religiously follow a novel for 6 years unless he loved it? Inala disliked the Risha from the initial parts of Sumatra Chronicles, but the Risha from the latter half was his favorite. Every single scene portraying Risha's excellence caused his blood to pump in excitement. And now, Asiya made him feel the same way. I'll definitely nurture you into a genius even better than Risha. I want to see you defeat him. At that thought, Inala couldn't control himself. He almost gave her all his skills. But a couple of seconds later, he understood his reckless stupidity and calmed down, taking in deep breaths. Control yourself, dumbass. If you give her everything, you'll only hinder her mental growth. Even Risha shone as a protagonist only after going through the rites that all protagonists go through. So shun your stupidity. He mentally berated himself as much as possible until his riled up thoughts turned calm like a still lake. The evening quickly arrived and it was time for Asiya to leave. She bowed in response. I gained a lot from you, Inala. I'll cultivate harder to become a successor. She announced. Good, Inala nodded, we'll keep your graduation target 10 months from now. Since you almost reached the peak of the spirit stage, that'll be easy. I'll also be training you on other areas to strengthen your spirit containers to the limit. Right, you're affected by the fragment disease. Asiya nodded in excitement. Despite that, and even after crying for 2 days due to the imagination art of defeat, you didn't lose a single unit of prana. I'm definitely interested in the know-how of your training methods. Don't worry, I'll be teaching it to you eventually. Inala nodded. You can reveal information about our relationship. But don't leak anything about the skills I impart to you. That should remain absolutely confidential. That goes without saying. Asiya bowed in respect and got up. I'll arrive every alternate day to avoid burdening your schedule. I'm aware you have a lot of portrait commissions as well. Take care, and be safe. Inala bowed farewell as he observed Asiya carry the imagination art and exit the guest room. Right next to it was the detachable room that shuttled between the 44th and 43rd settlements. Once Asiya boarded it, the room flew to the 43rd settlement slowly. A couple of stray zingers targeted it but were instantly killed by the elite station nearby. Inala observed the master that was controlling the shuttle, noticing a faint droplet of sweat covering his forehead. This master seems very old. If he were to ever falter, the shuttle would fall. And his condition makes it a possibility. A straight drop from this height guarantees death. It's the best opportunity for Asiya's siblings to deal with her. Wait a second. His eyes widened in realization as Inala observed the old man's eyes droop for some reason. His forehead was covered with sweat now. Right as a foreboding sensation pervaded his being, Inala saw the old man faint. And in response, the shuttle lost its balance and dropped, falling through the layer of clouds. Within it was his disciple, Asiya.